let's talk about certain examples of success stories that you may have had in the past.
Right.
And we can talk about any particular problem that a patient of yours may have faced. But if you have an example of somebody with vaginismus, that would probably be most relevant.
Sure.
What did their journey look like? And at the end of the day, what did they come out of the experience with?
So, specific to vaginismus, the woman that I worked with had, like I said, very specific goals of what she wanted to achieve. She wanted to achieve penis and vagina intercourse. And we didn't get to that point in the work because in the end, it wasn't really necessary. She was able to recontextualize sex in a really wonderfully juicy way that allowed her to have really good sex, even if she had vaginismus. And also gave herself a little bit of room to breathe. So she said, I am not, the entirety of my being is not influenced by my vagina and what it is doing right now. So that gave her enough space to continue her physical therapy, be mindful and patient in that process, and let the work just take, do the thing that it was meant to do without layering any specific types of expectations on that. So that, I feel like that was a success. That was, her being really, really aware of how her goals shifted and what her body needed. And once she found out what that was, she was done.
Yeah. And did she have a partner when she came in?
She did have a partner, yes. Yes. Another person that I worked with didn't even get past the communication stage. And that was actually, it was lovely. She had been repeating certain patterns that she had learned through abusive relationships in the past. And she was unable to give authentic yeses or nos and feel like those would be respected by her partners. So we were only together for that first session. And by the end of the session, she sat with me and she said, this has completely changed how I view interacting with people. This is really all I need. I think I'm going to sit with myself and practice this in my relationships and see how that goes. And that was a year and a half ago, maybe. I haven't heard back from her since. So I'm assuming that, it really resonated with her and she's able to change the course of her life through that.
That's amazing. One breakthrough in one session can just have such extensive effects.
Well, that's one of the things that is so powerful about surrogate partner therapy is because we're integrating what happens with our emotions and our brains and our bodies. The aha moments that can happen, you can visibly see them, you can feel them. It's also a ton of information to integrate, which is why we need that supervising therapist, right? They sit there on the back end and they say, okay, what are things that were brought up during the session? And usually it's just so much happens.
And how often does the client then go back to the therapist? Is it typically like one after the other, alternating, or does it just change depending on the situation?
Really the best way to do it to one ratio. So every time I have a session, they process that session with the therapist and also talk about their intentions for the next session. Depending on logistics, sometimes I might meet with a client once a week for an hour and a half. Sometimes I might meet with a client once a month for a more extended period of time, for maybe 4 hours at a time. And sometimes we even have what are called intensive sessions. So they're like 10 to 12 day sessions where you spend 5 or 6 hours a day. That's a lot of stuff to go through. And it is appropriate for some people and not for all. But you're doing the work with the surrogate. The surrogate is checking in with the therapist. The client is checking in with the therapist. And then you do the same thing the next day. That is kind of like a cosmic smack to the head where you are really saturated with a lot of different information, and you walk through the world very differently than when you started the sessions.